Hey, this is Jordan Ogren. I'm the marketing manager for My Talent Planner, and this is the Talent Planner Show. Thank you for joining us, whether you're watching this live or on a recording. We appreciate you checking this out. The Talent Planner Show is for growth-minded SMB leaders who want to solve not the second, the third, the fourth, but the number one issue limiting their growth, which is people issues. On this show, webinar, podcast, we'll discuss how those leaders are solving the consistent people issues they face through interviews, through processes, through tools, and through showing My Talent Planner with the software, walking through certain features that leaders are using to solve their people issues. So if you came here to solve your people issues and accelerate your growth, you're in the right place. And I want to introduce our SME, our subject matter expert, Steve Van Remortel, the co-founder and CEO of My Talent Planner. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, Jordan. Good morning, everybody. Excited for our show today. Let's dive in.
Yes, it will be great. So before we get into the show, if you have any questions, there is a chat and a questions feature on the bottom right of your screen. Throw any questions that you have there in there, and we'll answer them as we go through it. But this first segment that we always start the show off with our road warrior, Steve, is kind of seeing what's going on in the world for SMB leaders. And he kind of touched on 1 to 2 things, whether on his mind, things he's kind of thinking about, or other leaders are bringing to his attention. So Steve, what's your one thing for this week?
What came out of my discussions this week with SMB leaders is that leaders right now, this time of year, are starting to plan, if that makes sense. They're starting to think about, okay, what does our planning process look like for this coming year? Because the process typically starts up in September. And so July, August are really when we got to think about, okay, what is our process going to be this year? So that's what a lot of leaders were talking to me about this week is, I got to start planning out our planning process for this year. I got to get ready to plan. And that's what a lot of leaders are doing right now during these kind of summer months where there's a lot of vacation going on, a lot of leadership. It's difficult to get the leadership team together. But what does it look like when we come back together in late August, early September, and start talking about what our plan's going to be for 2023 and beyond? So that's what I've heard.
So positioning themselves well to be able to create the best plan, or to develop that plan when the time's right, is kind of where the leaders are at.
Yeah, I mean, having done this hundreds of times, our planning process hundreds of times, a great process leads to a great process. So being very thoughtful and lay out what you want your planning process to look like ahead of time, and making sure that it's going to get you, to where you want to be. Then you trust, once you have that finalized, then you trust the process, right? And so it's a great process leads to a great process. So if you're starting to think that stuff through, start getting it on paper on what your planning process looks for this year, for this coming year.
That's a good one, Steve. That's a good one.
All right. Hey, I had some listeners follow up with me after our last session, or our last webinar. We did a live demo of My Talent Planner and really showed people how we have combined strategy, talent, and execution in one place to help companies solve their people issues and execute their strategy and accelerate growth. And there were a couple questions that were asked, like, hey, could you cover this a little bit deeper? And so the first thing was, we haven't really dove into the pricing at all around My Talent Planner. And, is it a huge number? And so, for example, so let me just answer that question straight up. If you have 50 people on the software, you're looking at about $5,000 a year. If you have 100 people on the software, you're looking at about $8,000 a year. So, and as you add more people to the software, the cost per user gets less. And that really came from our CEO pilot group, that there were 4 CEOs that went through the build with us. And their communication to us was, hey, I don't want to push, like, let's say I report to you, Jordan, and hey, Jordan, I got a couple of my action plans done. Can you go in My Talent Planner and check them off for me? Like, we don't want to push the administration of the software up to our leaders and our managers. We want to let each people do it themselves. And so their feedback to me was, instead of, having that person come to that leader, that's for $7 a month. Let's just put that person on the software. And so that's our philosophy around pricing is, we want you to have everybody on the software because it engages the entire organization in your strategy, your talent, your execution. And then the second thing, there were some questions around, the onboarding piece of this. It seems like it would be a significant commitment. I mean, that's when I'm out presenting my talent planner every day and this whole concept of talent planning. And the feedback is, man, I got this initiative going on. I got that initiative going on. Like, where am I going to find the time to do this? And what we are doing in response to those questions is we're building out these options. And we're coming up with we're actually whiteboarding it right now as to what would a rapid ramp up look like, or an easy onboarding, and us putting some of or all of your strategy and talent into the system. And so within 1 or 2 days, you're up and running on the software. So those are all things that are in motion, and we're going to execute here in the next week or two, because that's the feedback. It's like, wow, what an amazing product. We want to get on this, but holy cow, how are we going to do this? So we're going to remove those obstacles to onboarding through just some very good process and systems that we're going to provide to our clients on My Talent Planner. So those were a couple things I just wanted to follow up on, Jordan. So I'm ready to dive into today's content, but I appreciated those questions. And if you have more questions, just throw them in the chat, or reach out. We're here to answer questions.
Yeah, and if you want to find any of the pricing, we do have a tab on mytalentplanner.com that has the pricing. It has a table that just kind of talks, or what Steve was talking about will make more sense when you can kind of see the table. And then we should in the future also have some area where it kind of talks to those different options or different ways to just get on the software with less, anxiety or less inertia. So mytalentplanner.com is a good place if you want to find out more about pricing or how to kind of get on it, if there's an easier way than kind of doing it all at once. So I think this is a good point to get into the main content today, which is talking about the hidden costs of talent, and then kind of talking about a few tangible ways, things leaders can do right now to reduce those costs. So Steve, if you want to just start off, I think you have maybe a story that can illustrate this cost of talent for the listener.
Yeah. So in my last company that I ran, we moved into a new facility. So we were a contract manufacturing food company, and this story relates to the cost of talent. So we moved into this new facility, and we're looking at our P&L statements, and our scrap is much higher than it should be, to the tune of about $350,000 a year of product that's not going into the package. And so we put a team together. We set it as a goal for one of our sprints, and it was that, what's going on here? So we built a facility that you could package taco seasoning right next to pancake mix, right? So it was a very and it had a big time air filtration system, like state of the art air filtration system. What we learned was we were sucking up a lot more of the product than we needed to. And so we had all this product going into our air filtration system, because you don't want your pancake mix to taste like a taco, right? At least I wouldn't like that. So anyway, what we did was we put a team together, and we analyzed what was happening, and we found that our air filtration system, we could back some things away and turn down the suction of the power of it a little bit. And we took $250,000 off our scrap line that went right to our bottom line. And that's the same thing with the cost of talent. The cost of talent is easily 6 figures for most companies, but the hard part about it's a hidden cost, because it's not on the P&L statement, right? And that's really one of the things that we talk to companies about a lot, is what is the hidden cost of talent? And should it be an item on our profit and loss statement? So for example, when we have a position open and we're missing out on business, or there's something we have greater cost because of it, tracking that and keeping the cost of talent. So that's one of the things that we recommend to companies, is really, what is the cost of talent? When somebody leaves, what is the cost of that? The training, they talk about it being 3 to 5 times annual salary is the cost of a transition like that. So anyway, that is the cost of talent. That's what we want to talk about today.
So that's a great story, Steve. I always enjoy when you share that, because I think there's some lessons, and they're just, you first obviously were losing the scrap, you were losing money. It took you kind of to be aware of that was the first step of, hey, we're losing money in this area. And then kind of got together as a team and you put a plan around that. What can we kind of do to stop this? Because it's significantly more than, if there's a benefit, sometimes you can use the cost benefit to not delete a cost. But I think it's important that, it was maybe easier to see because it was something you were tracking, scrap costs or scrap percentage. But to your point, you don't track, most times they don't track on the back end. What does that, kind of mistake with talent cost us? To some companies, they do that on the front end to budget for the talent,
Yep.
but they don't. Why is that? Why do some companies focus more on that budgeting and less on this kind of, hey, when we lose someone, this is what it costs. We really need to ensure that we have, hiring process that's effective, or retention kind of in place, engagement and such.
Yeah, you raise a great point there in that companies will track how much they invest in their people through development. They'll track the cost of adding a person. They'll track all that upfront cost, the cost of a recruiter, for example, all those costs that you use to get a person on board. But we're not tracking the cost of talent, of when we can't find a person or we hire the wrong person, or, I have a whole list here, right? We're missing out on sales because we are missing a salesperson or two, and we make a bad hire. We have underperformance. We have ineffective communication. We have turnover, lack of succession planning. So we have to go outside to make the hire, which automatically increases your risk of not making the right hire. And so all those things add up. And I think it's because of the hidden cost of talent that it's not as easy to define. It's not on our P&L statement, so we kind of ignore it. And I have encouraged companies and actually implemented the cost of talent metrics for companies. And some companies might think it's a HR metric, like the HR department metric. I would challenge companies to say that the cost of talent is a strategic metric for the organization, especially right now with the labor market we're in, right? Like it's going to be the question I would ask every leader, and we're dealing with this in our own organization as we launch the software and grow the software company, right, Jordan? We're working on filling a position. It's taken a little bit longer than we hoped and wanted to. But there's a cost to that. And so I'm challenging leaders to say, hey, let's make cost of talent a metric for this organization. Because when we saw that on our P&L statement that we had $350,000 of scrap, we as a leadership team responded to that number. And so if the cost of talent was on our P&L statement and it's hitting six figures, what are we going to do as a leadership team? We're going to be all over that, right? So I think the biggest issue there is it's kind of a hidden, not tracked cost. And if it was tracked, and people saw that it was six figures, they'd be all over it. So I think that's where the miss happens a lot. And, candidly, a lot of times I'm not tracking the cost of talent in our business as much as I should either. So I think that's why we track all this money we put into our talent, but we don't track the cost of not having the right talent or having talent at all in that role.
And I think you jumped into the next section of listing some of those examples, whether it's no succession plans, and that's great. But an idea or a thought that came into my mind is when you're calculating cost of talent, a lot of times when you calculate something, most times it's all there, like you can fully calculate it. But I feel with the cost of talent, there's like kind of tangible, like you can, where, because you're talking about, filling someone, that's a tangible hire that we just had to spend. But what about that strategy or part of the strategy not getting executed because you don't have the person? That's a intangible cost. So you can't like put on a paper, but you're not beating your competitors. You're not moving up market because you're unable to. Can you talk to that at all? Of maybe, the strategy or the execution that, inefficiencies because of the talent issues on that side? Like, do you see them interacting with each other in that way?
Yeah. And that came up in a recent meeting that you and I were sitting in, right, Jordan? It was, hey, Steve, this cost of talent thing is important and you got to measure that, but there's other cost because you're not working proactively upstream to solve your people issues. One of the costs that was brought up by a leader that we were talking with was, what's the cost of not being able to execute our strategy because we have an open position? Because we made a bad hire, because we got to, use a recruiter, we got to go outside. And so that kind of opened our eyes that the cost of talent's bigger than just the specific things that impact our business because of the talent issues, but it's impacting our strategy, and more importantly, the execution of our strategy. And so that's one of the key takeaways for us when we went through this process to understand what SMB leaders wanted in a software that helped them solve their people issues. They also wanted to make sure that their strategy got executed as well, because we solve our people issues, but we have to advance the organization at the same time. And so that was an interesting conversation, because when you look at the cost of talent, you have all these costs, like an open position, again, a recruiter, not having an internal leader, so we got to go outside, all those things. But what's the cost of not executing our strategy? And what's the cost of not advancing our business or clearly differentiating us against our competitors, and defending our space and our differentiation? So that was kind of a breakthrough conversation for us, because the cost of talent is much bigger than just the components that we think about within the talent space.
Which means whatever you calculate, you can probably 1.5x that as the true cost, because you can only really probably find, so whatever your cost is, just know it's likely higher through drip downs of other inefficiencies and stuff. So I think that's a real kind of potent point that I wanted to make before kind of transitioning to, okay, Steve, I'm aware of these people issues, the scraps getting sucked up, using your example. What do I do now? Like, what can I do? Plan for it, but what does that look like? So can you talk us through kind of some things leaders can do, actions or kind of processes they can do to reduce those costs?
So the first thing is consider putting the cost of talent as a strategic metric. The second thing, and this is something that happened to me too, as I really learned about this concept of talent planning and the hidden cost of talent, is really start adopting a more proactive mindset regarding talent. We're so busy in our day to day, and then all of a sudden we get a 2-week notice put on our desk, right? Or we have someone that something's not working out in another position, and we're reactive to that. The talent planners of the world, being the Talent Planners Show, they have a proactive mindset. They are working upstream to solve their people issues before they ever even impact the business. And what's an example of that? Being consistent with your one-on-ones. One-on-ones are a primary tool to implement talent planning. And what do I mean by that? By having those consistent one-on-ones, you're understanding where each of your team members, your direct reports are at, right? So if there's an issue, we can address it. And that's really what it is. It's about being proactive and having conversations about where things are going and how things are going, versus waiting, not having those conversations, and the person all of a sudden taking a position that they're going to exit the business, or they're underperforming. And so it's really the reason that so many leaders get smothered by the cost of people issues is that they're reactive, and they only solve them after they've hit their desk, after they've impacted the business. So that would be so the first thing is really consider cost of talent a strategic metric. And the second thing was really adopting a new mindset and move from being reactive to proactive in your mindset towards talent. And then the third thing really is execute talent planning. I truly believe, and all the metrics and the data is showing this, and we talked about that in our first webinar, that the data is telling us that the people issues are only going to continue to get worse. And the way that you're going to be able to solve your people issues and win the battle for talent that's going on is through talent planning. It's really working upstream. It's solving them in advance. It's understanding what the next 3 hires we're going to make over the next 3 years. It's understanding where each person in the organization, what their goals are, where they want to move within the organization. It's really working on those things out in front of any of that impacting the business. And so it's really about defining your strategic vision and then creating the talent plan to get you there. And then once you get into your execution cadence, now you're in that rhythm that helps you execute your plan. And as you execute your plan, you're executing your talent plan as well. So those are 3 things I'd recommend. Consider talent planning, consider the metric cost of talent, and really take a different approach or a different mindset and be more proactive to dealing with your people issues and working upstream with them.
That's good. And that kind of leads us into maybe your one takeaway. So obviously, do those three or see which ones of those three make sense. But what is kind of one takeaway, something the leader can do tomorrow, next month, this month to kind of start reducing the costs, or just to take away from this podcast?
Yeah. So the one thing that I'm doing right now, because we're experiencing some costs of talent as we grow the software company and the consulting firm as well, is really for 1 quarter, measure the cost of talent. Like measure when somebody leaves, how much money we're spending on training, on hiring. Is the open position costing us any revenue? Measure the cost of talent for 1 quarter and then multiply that times 4 and see how big that number is for your organization. There are some organizations that are proactive, that we work with, that are proactive already, and that cost of talent number is small, right? Because they've minimized their people issues. And then there's other organizations that we know that are very reactive on their talent, as I was previous to learning this concept of talent planning. And that number is easily 6 figures, probably $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year in the cost of talent. And if you saw that number on your P&L statement, I guarantee you that you would do something with that. And so let's test drive this cost of talent concept and measure it for 1 quarter and see if it brings value to you and your leadership team and your organization. See if there's legitimacy in calculating that number moving forward. If it doesn't bring value, obviously you want all your metrics to bring value to the execution of your strategy and talent plan. But if it does bring value, make it a strategic metric and really understand the impact that people issues, the hidden cost of people issues are having on your business. That would be the encouragement I have. And it's something that I'm doing here. And I think you'll be blown away by the size of that number.
And it gives you a benchmark too. If you start doing some of the three solutions that you were saying, you can then look, hey, in June, July, we're at X for our COT, cost of talent. And now in this month, we're lowering it, and then our revenue's going up. You can start to really feel it. And maybe even if you're not a leader, you can use some of that if you are part of the leadership team to say, hey, this is working. Like, we're doing consistent one-on-ones and our cost of talent is slowly kind of dropping. It can kind of build some wins or buy-in for your organization as well. So yeah, no, I like that. It's very tangible, very actionable based. So Steve, anything before I jump into the conclusion here? Anything on your mind? Any thoughts to share?
Yeah, I mean, the talent, the whole concept behind the talent planner webinar is that we talk about how leaders can solve their people issues and accelerate the growth of their business. And one of the ways that we're going to do that and want to do that is, as we continue to put more companies on the software, we're going to get more of those leaders on our show. So we're working on booking a guest for next week. It's a leader that just a very impressive leader that uses technology in his strategy and in his talent and in his execution. He has deep knowledge on the technologies that are out there, the software that's out there. And so we're working on putting that show together and really allow you to hear from other leaders on what they're doing to proactively solve their people issues and accelerate the growth of their business while executing on their goals and their strategic vision. So we're excited about, we wanted to cover some concepts here, some content here, some basics here, and really answer questions of people around the software and what talent planning is. But now we're going to start adding more and more leaders and interviews to our talent planner show and actually get talent planners on the show. So we're excited about that. And that's coming next week. And so I look forward to really engaging in and sharing best practices that other leaders are using with our listeners.
Yeah, that's good. You did my job there, Steve. I don't have to sell or market the next webinar because you already did. Yeah, make sure to tune into that one. That's going to be a great one and kind of a start of many future interviews, as to Steve's point of getting more talent planners on it. So thank you for tuning in, whether you're listening to this as a podcast or you're live on us with the webinar. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to check more out about My Talent Planner, obviously you can go to mytalentplanner.com, but we have a few different ways that you can engage with it. You can watch a short demo on the software. whether you just want to watch it, certain areas or watch the whole thing. You can read our free book, Talent Planning, which is essentially all about how to implement talent planning through the 7 steps. Doesn't talk at all about the software, so you won't get sold any of it in it. It's really for you to do it on your own. And then if you want to use the software to speed it up, scale it, and just take it to the next level, we're here for that. Or you can try a 14-day free trial. All you got to do is put in your credit card and you can kind of zoom around the software, or reach out to us and we can get you a sandbox if you'd rather kind of do that version and just check it out before you make a small commitment to do the free trial. So there's many different ways, and we'll have more ways for you in the future to kind of transfer over your strategy and different things over, so you can see it in the software and just kind of do a rampant ramp up. So there's a lot of things on the horizon, so make sure to come back for that. And if you want to walk through the software with Steve, with your leadership team, or just you can email me at jordan@mytalentplanner.com, and I'll get that scheduled for you and Steve, you and your leadership and Steve, to kind of walk through the software and really have it highly specific to your business. So that's it for the show. The future of talent is talent planning, and those who win the battle, and those who win that battle are talent planners. See you next week.